On December 21st, 1817, 22-year-old John Keats presses a quill to paper and writes a letter to his brothers, George and Thomas, diagnosing a fatal flaw in the human mind. The cold London winter presses against the window panes, but Keats is insulated by the heat of a recent debate. He has just returned from a walk with his friend Charles Dilke, a man who insists on categorizing the world, a man who demands a rational explanation for every whisper of wind and every human action. Keats finds this obsession with logical certainty suffocating. As the ink flows onto the parchment, Keats pieces together an entirely new philosophy. He tells his brothers that several things have dovetailed in his mind. He has discovered the exact quality that forms a true person of achievement. He calls it negative capability. Keats defines this as the state when a person is capable of remaining in uncertainties, mysteries, and doubts without any irritable reaching after fact and reason.
He uses the word irritable with deliberate precision. Irritability is a physical sensation. It is an itch that demands to be scratched. It is the restless, twitching discomfort of a mind suspended in the void of ignorance. Keats recognized that human beings are allergic to the unknown. When faced with a mystery, the natural reflex is to reach out, to grasp for a solid fact, to construct a framework of reason, just to make the discomfort stop. In the same letter, Keats points a critical finger at another poet, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Keats argues that Coleridge would ruin a beautiful, isolated truth caught from the depths of mystery, simply because he was incapable of remaining content with half-knowledge. Coleridge, in Keats's view, had to dissect the butterfly to understand its flight, destroying the beauty in the process.
To understand negative capability, one must look at the person Keats held up as its absolute master, William Shakespeare. Keats saw Shakespeare as the ultimate chameleon poet. Shakespeare possessed no rigid ego, no moralizing agenda that he forced onto his characters. He could breathe life into the villainous Iago and the virtuous Imogen with equal delight. He did not stand above his creations, judging them or demanding that they fit into a neat philosophical system. He simply let them exist in all their messy, contradictory reality. He submitted himself to the mystery of human nature without trying to solve it, demonstrating a complete capacity for anonymous shift-shaping.
To observe the absence of negative capability, step into the aftermath of any sudden, inexplicable tragedy. A community gathers. The air is thick with grief and the paralyzing shock of the senseless. Almost immediately, the air fills with platitudes. People step forward to offer reasons. They say it was part of a grander plan. They say everything happens for a reason. They construct elaborate narratives of cause and effect. This is the irritable reaching in its purest form. The people speaking these words are not necessarily trying to comfort the grieving. They are trying to comfort themselves. The raw, bleeding reality of chaotic suffering is too terrifying to face without a shield. Reason becomes that shield. By forcing a logical framework over an ambiguous tragedy, the mind attempts to regain control.
The Book of Job serves as an ancient testament to this dynamic. Job loses his wealth, his health, and his family. He sits in the ashes, scraping his sores, enveloped in profound, unanswerable suffering. His friends arrive. At first, they sit with him in silence, practicing a rare form of solidarity. But the silence becomes unbearable. The mystery of his suffering agitates them.
They begin to reach for reason. They interrogate Job, insisting he must have committed some hidden sin to provoke this punishment. The universe must be a logical place, they argue, where cause yields a predictable effect. They cannot tolerate the possibility that suffering can be random, that the universe might operate on principles entirely opaque to the human intellect. Job rejects their rationalizations. He chooses to dwell in the agony of the mystery, mourning without reaching for fact or reason, demanding answers from the void, but refusing the cheap comfort of false logic.
This modern world operates as a vast engine designed to eradicate negative capability. The device in your pocket offers an immediate factual answer to any question that crosses your mind within seconds. The space between wondering and knowing has been compressed to nothing. We are conditioned to view uncertainty as a temporary glitch, an error state that must be resolved through a quick search or a rapid decision. The muscle required to hold contradictory ideas, to sit in the fog of half-knowledge, has atrophied. We demand certainty in our politics, in our relationships, in our science. We want the world neatly divided into heroes and villains, right and wrong, success and failure. But profound insight rarely lives in the glaring light of absolute certainty. It hides in the shadows, in the nuances, in the ambiguous spaces where facts contradict each other and reason breaks down.
In the mid-20th century, a British psychoanalyst named Wilfred Bion pulls Keats's concept out of the realm of poetry and drags it into the clinical reality of the therapy room. Bion sits in a leather chair facing a patient whose mind is fractured by trauma. The patient speaks in disjointed sentences, offering fragments of memory, raw emotions, and contradictory impulses. The atmosphere in the room is heavy with anxiety. The patient expects a diagnosis. The patient wants the analyst to reach into this chaotic tangle of pain, extract a clean, logical explanation, and offer a cure. Bion feels the pressure. The urge to intervene is intense. The analyst's own ego demands that he prove his expertise, that he categorize the patient's suffering into a neat psychological framework. But Bion recognizes this urge as Keats's irritable reaching. He realizes that imposing a ready-made theory onto the patient's unique experience is a defensive maneuver. It protects the analyst from the pain and confusion of not knowing, but it shuts down the possibility of genuine discovery.
Bion trains himself, and eventually other analysts, to cultivate negative capability as a core clinical skill. He defines it as the ability to tolerate the pain and confusion of not knowing, rather than imposing omnipotent certainties upon an ambiguous emotional challenge. He demands that the therapist approach each session without memory and without desire. To remember past sessions is to force the present into a preconceived mold. To desire a cure is to manipulate the patient toward an expected outcome. Instead, the analyst must sit in the radical uncertainty of the present moment. They must act as a container for the patient's anxiety, absorbing the shockwaves of raw, unprocessed emotion without reacting. The silence in the room stretches. The tension builds. The analyst refuses to offer a quick interpretation or a soothing platitude. By tolerating the agony of not knowing, by dwelling in the mystery of the patient's mind, a space opens up. It is only in this empty space, stripped of false certainties, that a new, authentic insight can emerge. The profound breakthrough does not come from a sudden application of logic. It rises organically from the tolerated ambiguity.
Decades later, the echoes of a romantic poet's letter infiltrate an environment that Keats could never have imagined.
the modern corporate boardroom. The setting is a glass-walled high-rise. A company is facing an existential crisis. The market is shifted unpredictably. Competitors are advancing. The data is incomplete, contradictory, and entirely unhelpful. The environment is what management theorists call VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The executive team sits around a long table. The air crackles with the demand for action.
The prevailing culture of business dictates that a leader must be decisive. A leader must have the answers. To hesitate is to show weakness. The CEO feels the eyes of the board, the shareholders, the employees. The pressure to make a decision, any decision, is crushing. The temptation to grab on to the first plausible strategy, to reach irritably after a flawed fact just to relieve the tension in the room, is almost overwhelming. Here, negative capability becomes a subversive, controversial act. Management researchers have begun to study the application of Keats's philosophy in leadership. They frame it as the capacity for reflective inactivity. The CEO, practicing this capability, refuses the demand for immediate resolution. They hold up a hand and stop the frantic scramble for a quick fix. They acknowledge the limits of their knowledge. They embrace vulnerability by stating clearly to a room demanding absolute certainty that they do not know the answer. This generates intense conflict. The room rebels. The human brain interprets uncertainty as a physical threat.
Demands respect for the
board
materials.
demands a
sculptor
concrete
cannot
plan,
force stone
but
to
the
do
leader
something it is
holds
not
the space.
structurally capable of
They
doing
act
without
as a
breaking
container for the
You have to
organization's
understand the
collective
fault lines and the
anxiety,
density.
much like Beyond
In the same
in
way,
the therapy
if our
room.
goal as a
By
species is to
resisting
shape
the
our
urge
world
to
into a place
impose a
of lived
predetermined
beauty and
framework
meaning,
onto
we
a
have
novel
to deeply
crisis,
understand
the
the
leader
ecological
prevents the
limits of the
organization
planet.
from
The
executing
intellectual
a perfectly
truth of climate
logical,
science or
yet
ecology
entirely
is the
disastrous
prerequisite knowledge
strategy
we need,
based on
but the
incomplete
aesthetic
information.
realization is
In the
building a
pause,
society
in the
that
deliberate
actually
suspension
thrives
of
within
action,
those limits,
the team is
creating
forced to look
cities and
beyond
technologies
the
that
obvious.
integrate
They are forced to
seamlessly
synthesize
with the natural
contradictory
world.
data,
It
to
transforms
ask
the
deeper
concept of knowledge
questions,
from
to
a
allow
tool
their
of conquest
intuition to
into a
connect
tool of
disparate
collaboration.
dots.
We
The
are not just
innovative
cataloging
solution,
the universe to
profound
assert dominance
strategic
over
insight,
it. We are
eventually
gathering knowledge
crystallizes
so that we
not
can
from a rushed
participate in the
application of
ongoing
logic,
creation of
but
the
from
world.
the disciplined
It is a
endurance
shift
of
from
doubt.
dissecting the
Yet
frog
holding this
to
posture
building the
is an
pond.
agonizing
And that
endeavor,
synthesis is
even
what
for the
makes the
man who
human
named it.
experience unique.
The final
We have the
chapter
capacity
of John
for
Keats's
abstract,
life reveals
analytical
the
thought,
immense
but
difficulty
we also
of
have
living with
sensory
negative
bodies
capability.
that crave beauty,
In
rhythm,
1820,
and connection.
Keats begins to
John
cough
Dewey
up bright
believed
red
that art
blood.
was the most
He has watched
universal
his
form of
mother and
language
his brother
because it
Tom
speaks
die of
directly to
consumption,
that shared
the disease we
physical
now
and
call
emotional
tuberculosis.
reality. When
He
knowledge
knows
remains
immediately
purely
what the
intellectual,
blood
it
means.
stays locked in
He
the
is
minds of a
24
few
years old.
experts. When
He's
it is
fallen deeply
translated
in love
into an
with a woman
aesthetic
named
form,
Fanny Braun.
it becomes accessible
poetry
to
is just
everyone.
beginning
It
to gain
becomes part
recognition.
of the culture.
And he knows
That is a powerful
with
place to
terrifying
land.
certainty
The pursuit
that
of
he is going to
intellectual
die.
truth gives us the
The
vocabulary,
poet who
but
celebrated
aesthetic
the beauty
realization
of
is the poetry
uncertainty
we write with it.
is thrust
We move
into
from
the
mapping the
ultimate,
mechanics of the
unyielding
universe
fact
to finding our
of his
place
own
within its beauty.
mortality.
If this exploration
to
of knowledge
Rome,
and aesthetics
seeking a
shifted
milder
your perspective
climate,
today,
but the
pass
disease
this episode
ravages
along
his
to a friend
lungs.
who might appreciate the
As his body
conversation.
wastes away in a small room overlooking the Spanish Steps, his letters reveal a man struggling against the void. He longs for a life of sensations, but the physical pain demands his attention. He is tormented by the thought of Fanny Braun, by the life he will never live. The mysteries of the universe, once a source of artistic inspiration, now feel cold and indifferent. Keats finds himself unable to maintain the tranquil acceptance he once preached.
The human instinct to reach for a reason, to demand an explanation for unjust suffering, battles against his philosophical ideals. He is young, ambitious, and dying too soon. In his final months, the tension between his desire for negative capability and the harsh reality of his failing body creates a profound despair. He orders that his gravestone bear no name, only a single, devastating sentence. Here lies one whose name was writ in water.
He dies at the age of 25. Keats did not conquer the human impulse to reach irritably after fact and reason. His failure to maintain perfect negative capability in the face of death does not invalidate the concept. Rather, it underscores its immense difficulty and its vital importance. To tolerate the unknown, to sit in the darkness without reaching for a false light, is a deeply unnatural act. It requires a supreme effort of will to suppress the ego, to silence the demand for answers, and to submit to the vast, complex, often terrifying reality of a world that refuses to be neatly categorized.
The profound insights, whether they arrive on the stage of the Globe Theater, in the quiet intensity of a psychoanalyst's office, or in the volatile environment of a corporate crisis, only reveal themselves to those who have the courage to wait in the shadows. We're taught to be problem solvers, armed with logic and data, attacking the mysteries of the universe as if they are enemies to be vanquished. But the universe is not a puzzle to be solved. It is an experience to be inhabited. The truth of life is its mystery. To banish the mystery with a rushed explanation is to banish the beauty, the nuance, and the possibility of discovering something entirely new. The next time you find yourself standing before an unanswerable question, feeling the anxious twitch of irritable reaching, hold your hands still. Let the silence stretch. Let the doubt wash over you. The answer you need may not be a fact you can grasp, but a truth that only emerges when you finally stop trying to find it. Recommend this exploration to a friend who is navigating their own stretch of uncertainty.